Sales is manipulation. You're manipulating someone to do what you want. That's what sales is, if you break it down. And it's really rough to put it that way, but that's what it is. Can an AI manipulate a person? Absolutely. It can do it already today, easily.
Welcome to the Automotive Business Podcast. I'm Adrian Simpson, and this is the strategy room for the UK automotive trade. We bridge the gap between the retail forecourt and the corporate fleet to find the margins that others miss. Our guest today is Jens Peter Sjöberg, the co-founder and chief innovation officer of Phyron. Jens Peter brings a truly unique perspective to the automotive world. He spent over 30 years in the high-end film industry, contributing his visual effects expertise to blockbusters like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and Superman Returns. Now he's traded Hollywood sets for digital forecourts. At Phyron, he is leading an AI revolution that helps over 4,000 dealerships in 35 countries turn static inventory photos into professional, mass-customized videos, automatically and at scale. We'll be discussing how his background in visual effects influenced the development of Phyron's AI video platform and why he believes that in 2026, every car listing needs to be a cinematic experience to capture the subconscious emotional decisions of buyers. We will also dive into the future of zero human digital marketing and whether AI is truly ready to take over the role of the car salesperson. From Middle-earth to the Monday morning trade-ins, please welcome Jens Peter Sjöberg. Jens, let's start with the pivot. You spend years in the VFX trenches working on iconic features like Gollum. Now, what was the moment you realized that the same tech used to make a dragon look real could be used to make a car sell faster?
It started a bit earlier than that, but I've always been into building solutions, and that goes into visual effects a lot. I was working in commercials for advertising, and then I got the question more or less, is it possible to do something that's unique for the viewer? And that's how it all started. And then that problem itself was just exciting, and I had to solve it. This was 2009. And that was the first kick towards what became Phyron 6 years, or actually longer, but 10 years later. But that's the first thing I did in this sphere. And even early in the visual effects industry to automate things, because there's so much work for each thing you do. The more you can automate things, the easier the actual creative work is, or more fun the creative work is. So that's where that came from, to automate as much as possible and then have the creative freedom later on in the process. So I took that with me and built upon that, I would say.
You're coming from a background where your primary task really is to entertain people, to an area where you're really required to sell units, basically. Is there a corruption of your artistic flair there? Is there anything you have to give away or give up?
Not really, as I see it. Sure, in the end kind of result, the creative process for me is in solving that problem and the absolute best way I can do. That's half of it. And then the other half is creating beautiful images. But I think to me, they go hand in hand, especially with what I do today. In a way, yes, but in a way, no. Personally, I get the same satisfaction. Maybe not the end viewer, but yeah.
Were you a car guy to start with? When the automotive world approached you, was this an easy sell because you were into cars, or is it something you've had to adapt?
No, to be honest. I'm more of a car guy today after these 7 years with Phyron, for sure. But as it started from commercials and then moving into the automotive, to me, it was more of a business decision at that point than actually love for cars. But with that said, today I love cars. So it came out something good with it.
Now, you moved from a world where you get months to perfect a single shot to a world where it's much faster paced and you have to turn these things around a lot more quickly, I'm guessing. How did you adapt your Hollywood perfectionism to selling cars online?
It's really hard when it comes to some parts, obviously. But other parts, it comes with the process of actually building the backside of things that you actually don't see. That's where I get that sort of satisfaction with it, to the huge problem of rendering. And today I think we're close to 1 million videos a month. Just be able to do that and everything that surrounds that, to me, is such an interesting task. And I get the satisfaction from that in that sense because of the perfection in that. But sometimes it's really hard, I would say, with the final product. You always want to push it and get it to look better and better, but it's really hard. It's always a trade-off between the data that we get into it and how much value can we do this data. It's looking crap, but we can still get it like 70% better or something. That to me is quite satisfying too, actually. But sure, it's the back end to me today, I would say.
And I'm guessing from where you started all those years ago to now in tech, especially in the last sort of 5 years, it can accelerate those processes to a degree which you weren't able to enjoy before.
Yeah, exactly. So there's one thing to really think about when it comes to AI technology. The progress that we've seen the last 4 years, 5 years, is that, for example, to make 1 million videos in a month, if you were only using AI to do that, you couldn't do that financially. So there is a huge thing with this, that it's absolutely getting better, but it's also getting more expensive. If you use only AI for this, you can't really do it. So that's one thing to also have in mind. The technology is getting better, but the cost of the technology needs to be matched the kind of progress that it's doing. And that's not really happening. I mean, you could do films today if you wanted automatically, but with the costs of generating those feature films with everything that involved, it's too expensive to do it. I would say even the research and development for a small company on it, it's too expensive. So it's really interesting how we can see one clip today that it's amazing, but getting that whole package with the story, it's harder and more expensive. So it's a double-sided thing, I would say.
Do you think that coming in as an outsider to the automotive world was a benefit or a hindrance to you in what you needed to do and what you were expected to do?
I think it's good to have another perspective. The automotive industry is really conservative and they are late. They test things really late compared to other industries. And that's one thing that we have actually got the taste of in Phyron. It took a long while before we got like a footprint in any market. But it's also, once the industry has adapted, I think it's really interesting, good space to be in. It's really interesting how it develops.
So when it comes to making cars look more exciting and ultimately selling cars through the visual format, what are you doing differently that other people weren't doing?
I think we push it. We push the quality, we push everything, and that's different, I think. A lot of people go with products and things that market already has, and we don't. We push every innovation we do towards something that's going to be more entertaining, more interactive, more storytelling, and more emotions than anyone. And I think we focus a lot on that, and I think that's our strength.
So you've been doing it for a few years now. Do you think it's getting harder to sell cars?
Yes, I would say so. Yes, I would say it is. Market is still growing, but we've seen with the EVs coming when they came into the market and the way they did, took a lot of market shares. And I think there will be new financial models and ways of buying cars in the near future, I would say. I think that's a really interesting thing. And I think that's going to happen over other industries too, really soon, actually. And we've seen it already happening.
I was fascinated even if it didn't. So when you're talking about those different financial models, what are you talking about?
Subscriptions, could be sharing vehicles, things like that. I have more thoughts on it, but I can go deep on that one.
Maybe for another time. Now, you talk about the emotional drop-off where a manufacturer spends millions on a glossy TV ad, but the customer lands on a dealer website looking at grainy photos and it all like drops off. How does AI preserve that brand emotion for these potentially aging cars that you would see on someone's forecourt?
We need to go back to the 50s to answer that question. Emotions sell, and everybody knows that. And that's what sells, actually. It's the car industry has leaned on small family companies that sells used cars to the customers coming to the showroom. And what happened when this got all digitalized, we can show an image of the car. They know what they're buying if they're interested to come down. That's where it all ended. It has been thought of as really complicated to do things. So it just stayed in that way and stayed that way for many years. And then there came 3D60 turntables and things like that, even in the early 2000s. And I think today we have a really interesting window where everything is getting more digitalized, and the car industry has been in the backwater when it comes to all this. And I think to recreate that emotion that the car salesperson in the 50s was actually creating when he met the people in showroom is actually, today it's possible to do that. And you can do that with the technology more or less on the shelf if you're doing the right way. So that's what I think will happen, is that it's going to be more interactions. It's going to be more trust built towards the customer, and the experience will create the motion for the customer to place itself with this car. That's what it's all about. You place the customer in the dream. And I think today that's possible. You don't have to stand and talk to the person in the showroom. And I think that's where AI comes in to personalize that, to make the message more emotional towards a specific person and so on. I can go deep on this one too. So
I am really interested about this, Jens, because we are all living in an age where we are now regularly interacting with AI bots on all different types of websites, and we're really happily doing it, and we're really comfortable with doing it. Are you suggesting that in a really short space of time, we are going to just almost exclusively be buying cars through an AI experience?
Yes, absolutely. I don't think sales itself is not going to die, but it's definitely going to be not as many salespeople, if I put it that way. You will definitely buy things from an AI.
I find that fascinating because I know that in the UK, we buy more things online per head than pretty much any other country in the world, far more than America or most countries in Europe. But there's always been a couple of things that people just tend not to buy, and that's online, that's property and cars. And I know that's been changing. And for me, it's fascinating that you're suggesting that people will quite happily now cross that divide and say, yeah, that really expensive purchase, I will happily go and do that through an AI bot without having that human interaction.
Yeah, I'm 100% sure. I may be wrong, but to me, I think it's so clear. For example, what is sales? Sales is manipulation. You're manipulating someone to do what you want. That's what sales is, if you break it down. And it's really rough to put it that way, but that's what it is. Can an AI manipulate a person? That's the question. It's not the question if it will sell. Is it, can an AI manipulate a person? Absolutely. It can do it already today. Easily. Easy. I can put up an agent today to do manipulation if I want to. I think it's already there, more or less. It's just that you need to integrate this into the buyer's journey. But that's a totally different question. So for car sales to actually utilize this, you have to integrate it, right? And you have to integrate it the right way. I think that's going to be the bottleneck in all industry. It's going to be, how do we integrate this in the right way? That's going to be the hard thing, I think.
If you're enjoying the Automotive Business Podcast, then why not check out our video reviews on business motoring, where we test drive everything from the venerable Range Rover right through to the latest Chinese SUVs, allowing you to make the very best informed decision for your next fleet purchase. It was interesting what you were saying earlier, and I completely agree with it. I've read loads of stuff about it myself, about people buying emotion. Price doesn't necessarily come into it. Practicality doesn't necessarily come in it. People buy on emotion. So it's really interesting that an AI bot could emotionally engage and potentially manipulate somebody, a real life human, into making that purchase.
Yeah, I've done tests on this. I did this 1.5 years ago with a pretty not as advanced LLMs that there are out there today. And I would say it's spot on. And I don't know if it's scary, but it's pretty interesting. It's really interesting.
I think it's absolutely fascinating, just the change that we're going to see. Now, I know in film, CGI makes the impossible look real, but in the trade, with doing what you're doing, can that be construed as misrepresentation? Is there an ethical red line between cinematic presentation and a digital falsehood, if you like?
Well, yes, absolutely. And we have had those problems. And I think everybody has that works with digital images. Is the representation in the digital image correct? But this is important according to what the customer wants to communicate. Because, and this is really interesting too, because there are two sides of this. Some wants to make their used car look beautiful. But to make it that shitty car look beautiful, you have to do something, right? So I don't think what we do is we use the images and everything, and it's not manipulated in any way in some of our solutions, but in some they are, because the customer or the end customer requires that for a specific vehicle or group of vehicles. As long as you communicate what you're communicating, I think it's fine. That's all what it's about, I think.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, used car sales people around the world for many years have been trying to make their cars look slightly not as they appear, with polish and Tikka and everything. So it's just a digital advancement from that. Now, if we put it into practical terms, if I'm a fleet manager trying to defleet 500 cars, how does something like cinematic AI video change my remarketing speed compared to traditional methods?
This is actually really interesting. It all depends on the platforms you have to show those cars and all that, right? But there is a couple of specifics that are really interesting here. It's, for example, personalized videos. Personalized videos is awesome for something like that, because you usually have buyers that already bought a car and they're in the end of a contract or something, and then they want to get a new car with the same financing, yada, yada. And that's where I think is the most efficient way, is personalized videos for that. In a campaign way, offering something before they got rid of the old, like if it's been 18 months, let's say, and then you know that they are usually renewing their contract after 18 months with a fleet car. Then you know this in the retention system, and then you can send out the marketing straight to that person, and you can make that specific targeting to that person and do the film around that person. So this is something that I really believe in. This is where we started, right? Like I said, 2009, but now we're releasing it as product at Phyron for selling cars. So it's going to be really interesting. I think it's the numbers we have on this is just mind blowing in the way people interact with it. It's amazing. If you compare it to any advertising or anything, it's just amazing numbers.
Is this sort of cinematic AI approach to selling marketing, is that being copied, or are you copying it across other industries?
Not really. Yes, but at the same time, it's, to me, it doesn't really matter if it's a car or if it's a watch. If you tell the story and you know the triggers and you know what sells for that specific object, I think that's what it's all about. And it's a matter of communication, and it's a matter of creating the trust and everything that comes with that to get the sales done, if that makes sense. I think it's creating the communication instead of standing and selling into someone's face. This is just the same thing, but you're just selling with a bit other means, so to say, if that makes sense. I don't know.
That makes perfect sense. So your app captures photos in 5 minutes. What is the golden rule, in your opinion, of car photography that most people consistently get wrong?
It's surprised me how bad photos are. I would say taking a shot of the roof of the car in a too high angle is maybe not the best angle. It's a really hard question because it's also about taste, but that's why we created the guidelines in our app. We have 16 angles, which should be the perfect presentation of the car. But in my opinion, you could go outside that frame, but that's what we see. It's the 16 angles of the car, and it's from X amount of degrees on the sides, and then you go around it to get a good overview. I think the most important for the actual photos that you see that present merchandise the car is to follow the golden rule of showing what you're buying in the best way. And I think that's the angles. It's showing the angles. But then there is another thing where you could put in the creativity into this. But I see, for example, there is a couple of, it's really interesting actually, it's a couple of like dealers that has really exclusive cars, and they do that creativity when you should actually instead focus on showing the car and be creative maybe in another set of images or so on. And this is something that combining merchandise with building the emotion, it may not be the right thing sometimes. The customer has to agree, I want the emotions now, or now I want the price and the mileage. That's an agreement, I think, that is a bit confusing for customers today.
That was a perfect answer. And I do like the idea of that agreement. Now, most effective social media platform for car video in 2026, what do you think?
Oh, it's a hard one. It's really hard. YouTube is really good, but maybe that's not for your inventory, but actually for marketing and not specific cars, maybe reviews and things like that. It's going to be good in 10 years' time, right? YouTube is what it is. But we've seen, obviously, that TikTok has taken a lot of steps for the last, I would say, 6 months. The funny thing is they released 2 years ago, they had straight in feeds into TikTok to do catalog advertising, both for any product. And so we were actually on this 2 years ago. Then they just locked it down, and now they launched it again. So I think we're going to see a lot of things happening this year on TikTok, I would say.
Do you have to shoot differently and have different ideas for Instagram, TikTok, YouTube? Or do the same assets work everywhere?
Everywhere, but we follow different guidelines, right? So all of them has different guidelines. So we have that. But what we're doing right now is developing more towards TikTok, I would say, to do actually integrate avatars for selling the vehicles in a totally different way. A lot of other small things that will make them more TikTok-y, if that makes sense.
So just out of interest, is it difficult to build a relationship and trust with AI, coming back to that customer agreement? And is there a growing trust there, or are you still having to build it?
It's a hard question. It depends on what it is, I think. There's a huge amount of hatred, I would say, against AI. Especially in my old community, in the visual effects community, it's divided. It's really, one side just hates it, does not want anything to do with it, and then the other side just embraces it and loves it. And I think it's the same everywhere. I think it's divided. I think it's almost like 50-50, it feels. It's also how you utilize the AI itself. For our inventory videos, for example, this is actually crucial. When you talk about this, you have to bring this up because AI can help with the final product, but it's not the final product. So that's the difference, I think. For example, if you look at the visual effects industry, which I took as an example, there is a lot of things where the creative is left to the AI. And that's not the case when we do things in that sense, because it's only utilizing the data coming in, but it's all built by humans. It's more, I would say, it's more, if you got to be against something, it should be the automation in that case. That's how I see it.
In an industry that moves as fast as this one, a weekly update isn't always enough. For the daily intelligence that franchise and independent dealers rely on, make sure you're heading over to Motor Trade News. From live market shifts to the latest trade pings, we keep you informed between episodes. You're listening to the Automotive Business Podcast. I was going to find out a little bit more about your pathway. I'm reluctant to use the word journey because people in X Factor use the word journey and I used to deride them for it. So how does Jens Peter Sjöberg go from that young boy to working in visual effects to then being at the cutting edge of selling and marketing cars in the automotive world?
Okay, so started with working in film when I was 14, went to school 16 to a film college. So I started really early, started working in film. And when I was, I think, 19, I got my first real job. This was in the end of the 90s. So it was really hard, especially in London, actually. But it was really hard getting into the business. So we had machines, we had like computers. These computers costed like 500,000 euros for one machine. And just getting time on those costed money. So I did everything I could to get on one of those machines, and I learned that really fast. And those were the only machine, like the only computers then that you could actually do video and high-end video on, effects and post-production. So I got this after my school. I just emailed, I think it was like 30 companies or something. And I got this perfect job at one of the high-end commercial post houses in Stockholm. And then I just banged. I worked like 19 hours a day, just hammering. Did really well. And then from there, I got an offer from Nordisk Film, which is a huge Danish production company, to start a new post house with 2 other people. So we got funding and everything. I got tired of that after 1 year. Ants in my pants, as I put it. And then I actually applied for the movie in New Zealand, and I got that job, flew down and got the job, I also then came home, studied a bit, and then went to London. I just do this fast forward now. Worked in London for a bit, and then I came home. So I'd done quite a lot in a short amount of time. Like I was young still. So I started companies, and we got shots on the Wild Things R, for example, from London. It went really well. But from there to where Phyron is today, it's from the commercials. It's working with agencies and commercials took me towards this because I'm a creative person and I love solutions actually. And that's how it came about, I would say.
Do you miss working in films or not?
Yeah, sometimes, but it's quite rare actually. Why I actually left was because the industry changed. The industry changed a lot during the years. When I was working on Lord of the Rings, we had a team of 40 people max. And it was like I could stand with Jim Riegel, who was the supervisor for the full Lord of the Rings, and talk to him. It was like we worked together. But then after that, it just went chaos. And it wasn't fun anymore, not in the same way. And one thing that's really interesting is it wasn't as creative either. It lost the creative touch. It was more like factories in the end. So that's why I think found other ways to utilize my creativity.
So what was that conversation like when somebody or some organization said to you very loosely, Jens, we'd like your expertise to sell cars? How did that go?
So when we started Phyron 19, we started with everything. So we started with e-commerce. We had a huge Swedish company called Lyko. They had 150,000 products, which we rendered over 5 days or something like that. Did a product video for all of them. And we were growing quite good when we started. But there was a problem, and that was actually making models for products is impossible. When we started moving into ML, we pretty early understood that the technology would be more adaptable to one product, but we already had actually automotive customers, and we saw that we could use the same sort of models and development that we'd done on multiply of them, because every new client that we had in e-commerce, we had to rebuild stuff every time, and that wasn't the best thing. It was fun, but to scale and to be able to grow, it wasn't the way to go. So that's when we took the decision to go fully into automotive and only focus on that.
Phyron isn't looking at any point to branch out into any other sectors.
No, I'm a creative person. Of course, I haven't thought in those in way, but no, not tomorrow.
As you're a creative person, Jens, I'm going to ask you a question. If you were a car, what car would sum you and your character up the best?
That's a good question. Probably Volkswagen, one of those old 60s van ones. Surf car, I think. That's me.
Split screen, surf with barn doors. And
Yes.
I think the whole of Sweden will be reeling from the fact that you didn't choose a Volvo, but there you go. Jens, it's been lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for your time and your fascinating story and expert opinion on the cinematic AI approach to doing what you're doing. I've really enjoyed it and I've really appreciated your time. So thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing what you come up with next. What's on the horizon?
The personalized video, look out for that. That will be really interesting, what we're doing with that. And also to the more experiences into our products and the way we present them.
I can only say growing up in the 1970s, owning a car was full of experiences, none of which I'd like to repeat in my adult life. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was Jens Peter Sjöberg, Chief Innovation Officer at Phyron. It's not every day you talk to a man who's gone from crafting the visual effects for Lord of the Rings to automating the UK's digital forecourts. But JP's message is clear. In a 2026 market saturated with choice, if you aren't telling a cinematic story, you're invisible. You've been listening to the Automotive Business Podcast. I'm Adrian Simpson. Make sure you subscribe on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you on the next shift from the forecourt to the fleet. Goodbye.